And hopefully now you're seeing my presentation.
Yeah.
Okay. So good morning, everybody. I am Jeremy Garbat-Welch, the facilitator for the CCAP Chaplain Training Program. And Luta, my wife, is the Africa Community Health Facilitator. And you just need to pretend I'm there in person so I don't have the kids with me. It just all works better that way. I want to start by saying thank you. Thank you for accompanying the work of the Church of Central Africa Presbyterian, or CCAP, and especially for accompanying us as we've been here in the USA during this time of the COVID pandemic. Your financial support continues to support us and the Chaplain and CHE programs as we work remotely with the CCAP. As the Amusa CHE Center, located in the eastern part of Zambia, began identifying problems within their community, they also identified that in addition to addressing the physical and spiritual needs of the community, that the CHE volunteers and committee needed a way to sustain the work of the CHE program. To support the work of the Amusa CHE Center, they purchased 3 pigs to create a pass-on program, where the offspring of these pigs would become an income-generating project. And the pass-on means that every season, one of those piglets would be given to another family to start their own income-generating project. The income from the starting project would cover 2 needs. One was to finance the work of the CHE program and cover the costs of school fees. And the second was to cover the costs of school fees of orphan children in the community. In 2020, the Amusa CHE team was able to cover the costs of school fees for 3 children. In 22, they hope to be able to support 7 children. As Reverend Chilenge, the CHE coordinator for the Synod of Zambia, shared this story on their WhatsApp group, Luta was struck by the community care element intentionally interwoven into the finance strategy for supporting the CHE program. Those in need of care who cannot provide for themselves were thought of from the very beginning, enveloped into their model from day one. It started us down a road of reflection on CHE and how we approach the concept of community. As we share with you of how we've seen community as a foundation for transformation, we'd like you to reflect on your own community. Here are some questions that you can ponder as we share. I would like to particularly highlight the last question because that may not be as clear what I'm asking there. What needs in your community could actually be an indicator of a resource? This is a way of thinking that I learned from permaculture practice. It's a form of very holistic and integrated gardening and agriculture. One of the sayings that I heard at the beginning was, we don't look at problems. So rather than looking in your yard and saying, I have too many snails, you look in your yard and say, I don't have enough ducks. So rather than seeing a surplus problem, you see a place you could put in a new thing. So instead of the snails being a problem, they become a resource. They become food for your ducks. So sometimes when we look at our communities and we see a problem, we could reframe that and think, what resource might this actually represent? One in Malawi would be, there's a lot of waste paper. Well, instead of saying we have too much waste paper, we could say we don't have enough paper brick enterprises to turn all this paper into a usable product. One of the tenets of community health evangelism, or CHE, is focusing on local resources to meet the needs of the community, rather than relying on outside resources. When we discuss this with the communities we work with, they tend to focus on identifying resources that are more tangible: trees, water, chickens, tools. And they're trying to shift their thinking from focus on what we have to focus on what we have, rather than what's usually the focus, which is what we don't have. We may even talk about people as resources: the health surveillance assistants, the pastor, brick builders. We focus on specific needs and specific tools to meet those needs. Another tenet of CHE is community projects, things the community can do together to address the health and spiritual needs of their community. When they discuss community projects in theory, they discuss things like building a bridge together across a river that is a barrier for kids to get to school during the rainy seasons, or advocating to the government to supply a teacher in their area to reduce the distance kids have to walk to school. These are real examples from Nkoma Synod and the Synod of Zambia Che communities, and important valuable projects for the community to work on together. However, when Luta looked closer at the Che initiatives of Nkoma Synod and the Synod of Zambia, she noticed that community is woven into all aspects of the work rather than in just some of the standalone projects. For example, in Nkoma Synod, food insecurity was identified as one of the main concerns of the Che communities. The root causes of this food security are multi-layered: poor soils, poor management of maize yields to sustain families for the whole year. The Che communities identified 3 initiatives that would address those root causes. One was planting trees. Some trees would be nitrogen fixing for soil nutrition, some would be planted for firewood, and some for fruit. The second initiative was planting kitchen gardens near homes to provide vegetables so that the families wouldn't have to sell their maize yield to just buy basic vegetables. And the third was more accountable maize storage management. In all of those solutions, the Che communities approached them collectively. Previously, each individual family harvested and stored their maize in their own home. To address the issue of families selling their maize and then not having enough maize to last the year, the community chose a family's home that had more space, and at harvest time, everybody's bags of maize were stored and accounted for in this one home, creating a central storage location. They used this central storage location to hold each other accountable for using their maize for nourishment rather than a quick sale. The communal response, keeping each other accountable for their maize use, strengthened the connections of working together to address their needs. The community also agreed together that planting trees was a tool they would use to address food insecurity. But rather than each family going off and working on their own to plant their own trees, the communities established tree nurseries to raise seeds into saplings before planting out in their field. Growing a tree nursery together saves resources, and it benefits everyone in the community. No one is left out. People don't miss out because they were at work or had a sick child or had a funeral to attend. They take turns planting, watering, and nurturing the trees. As Luta has worked with the Che communities, she's come to see the collective community, not just individuals within the community, as a central local resource. The Che communities are not taught how to be a community. They use the strength of their existing community to be a resource for each other. Instead of each individual family working to solve their problem, the communities work together to solve individual problems. Mr. Chimwezi, the Che coordinator of Nkoma Synod, recently sent Luta this video that he had taken of one of the Che communities digging a compost pit. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it well enough.
These Che women are busy making manure. They are digging pits. Then they will be following the procedures of how to make composite manure. This is very interesting. That's what we are doing here to develop our own families.
His words at the end, this is what they're doing here to develop their own families, shows that they're thinking not just at the individual family level, but collectively, together at the community level. And that the work to develop the farm, which is what compost is for, is also work to develop their family. When I first met Chaplain Harris Safuli, who is second on the left there, he shared with me a plan for increasing chaplain coverage that he had been working on. He's one of the few CCAP chaplains who is not an ordained reverend. He's appointed by the Lilongwe, that's the capital of Malawi. He is appointed by the city churches there to be a chaplain at Kamuzu Central Hospital, which is the main government hospital there in the capital. He knew that there were not enough ordained pastors to become chaplains at all of the hospitals in Malawi. So he thought, why not lay people like him? His plan was to begin with the main district hospitals and to train one member of the CCAP congregation closest to it. It has been many years in the making, but his plan is finally coming together. Another chaplain involved in the project is Chaplain Reverend Gamaliel Kalebe, the head chaplain at Nkoma Hospital. He's on the far right there. Together, they are visiting each district hospital and the congregation nearby. They have the support of the Malawi Ministry of Health and the Synod of Nkoma, and they're making sure that the local leaders, the district hospital administration and local pastors, will also support the lay chaplains. Chaplains Safuli and Kalebe see that the community can be the resource to address its own need. Congregations already do ministry in their local hospitals. They've seen that the communities are a resource for pastoral care and are working to develop that further. A dedicated chaplain in every district hospital will represent a huge increase in pastoral presence and spiritual care in the medical setting. In this picture, Chaplain Reverend Wycliffe Zulu in the center there, and members of the prison committees are presenting donated masks to prison officers and inmates. Donations like this are a common part of CCAP prison ministries. In addition to sharing physical resources with those who have need of them, Nkoma Synod Prison Ministry seeks to transform people's painful experiences. Reverend Wycliffe Zulu is the Nkoma Synod Prison Chaplain. He's trained as a trauma healing facilitator through the American Bible Society's Trauma Healing International Program, and he has led multiple groups in the prisons. That has become harder during the pandemic, but the trauma healing remains a focus for him. After leading groups in the prisons, Reverend Zulu has seen that the trauma healing groups can benefit all the people he works with, and this includes the members of the Prison Ministry Committee. CCAP prison chaplains work closely with committees in the various local congregations to help facilitate ministry in the prisons. Usually, this relationship focuses on coordinating visits from a congregation to a prison. However, Reverend Zulu sees that if the members of those committees went through trauma healing, they would be better equipped to minister in the prisons. The healing groups themselves also utilize the community in the process. Group attendees learn not only about how God is present with them through struggles and provides healing and forgiveness, but they also learn how they can help one another heal through empathetic listening. Leading trauma healing groups with those who minister, whether they are lay teams or ordained chaplains, will not only strengthen their ministries, but also strengthen their communities. Chaplains are a resource to the community as they provide care to its members. They provide pastoral care in times of need, and they help connect people with their resources, such as items to meet their physical needs. Chaplains also use the community as a resource to provide pastoral care. As community members reach out to those in need, chaplains work alongside them to train and empower community members to use their gifts and skills to provide pastoral care and support. As we minister with the CCAP, we've seen that their communities are a key part of the ministry. They're not just the place where ministry happens to happen, but they are the starting resource to doing ministry holistically and well. In the USA, we often talk about community mobilization, seeing that there is a certain need that would be best addressed by getting the community involved. In Malawi, we've seen that the community doesn't seem to need the same level of mobilization. It just is. Community is the default starting place. As the saying goes, we are, therefore I am. As we minister with the CCAP and are challenged by their focus on community, we hope that you too will be challenged to see your communities as your starting place. Funso alipo, which means, are there any questions? I know this presentation was a little shorter. We are aware that we tend to not leave a lot of room for questions. So I wanted to leave plenty of time for a discussion if any of you have any thoughts.
Anybody in this room have questions?
Jeremy, I wonder if you could speak a little bit about sort of your ministry in relation to what you've shared with us. What's next for you all as you enter back into community as you've expressed it here?
So my specific role with the chaplains is to work on their training. So as we were leaving Malawi, we'd had a meeting. I was able to put together the Chaplain Advisory Council, which I think I talked more about the last time I shared. So the next step when we go back is to put some of those plans into action. I've been working on some of the details while we've been here, curriculums and learning programs. The hope would be, particularly with the trauma healing, to get more involved with that, to get more groups going. If the prisons are not allowing that anymore because of visitation restrictions, to find other places where we can get that going so that the impact of the trauma healing program starts to spread. And then the next step for me too would be to get back in touch in person with the chaplains and to do some of the specific training programs they'd wanted, and they'd wanted those piloted at the theological schools. So that would be the next steps. Luta's work has largely stayed the same. She's not often on the ground with the Che trainers for various cultural reasons. She works with the directors of the Che programs, and because she's never lived next door to them, that's always been over the phone and the internet and things like that. So she does miss meeting with them because that did happen. But for a large part, her work has stayed the same, one of encouragement, one of guidance, and one of helping with clarity and finding answers. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Should we pass the?
You need to stand up or sit
Yeah,
down?
I think it might be good to take your mask off.
Oh, yes, good. Mask. Jeremy, thanks very much for your presentation. I have two questions. How do you convince these people to have enough patience for over many years to grow trees that they can use? Most of us, particularly in the West, want immediate something. There's no such thing. Look at politics. There's no 5-year plan, 10-year plan. It's a 6-month plan. So how do you convince those people to have the patience to wait for years to see the fruits of their tree planting? The second question is, what is your background that you're showing us now? That doesn't look like Kentucky. Thank you.
Yeah, that is not Kentucky. That is Mount Mulanje, from Mount Mulanje. Mount Mulanje Massif is like a plateau. They call it the island in the sky. It's we love it there. We've hiked it just a couple times. We've not yet done a peak. The peaks are even more work. To get up to the top of the plateau is a few hours, and then you hike a few hours to a peak, and then you hike a few hours up the peak and down. So there's many places to stay up there, little cabins where you can bring your sleeping bag and set up. This was a trip we did sometime before sometime in 2019, I can't remember now. And we hiked up from where we start, the right side of the mountain, which I know that doesn't tell you much. And then that's looking to the across to where there's a kind of a crater bowl, and there's a number of peaks over on that side. So it's one mountain, but there's this enormous chasm in between. You can't just walk across from where I am to that other side. It's an incredible place. I've also been told that Mount Mulanje inspired or it might have been Mount Zomba, but one of the mountains in Malawi inspired the backgrounds, the setting for Tolkien as he wrote The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Your other question was about trees and patience. And yeah, that is one of the challenges. I think if you notice, when I mentioned the tree planting, what Luta said was, they planted 3 different kinds of trees. And I think that's part of it, is to say some of these trees that we will plant will be quicker, and they are for the point of cutting back down to using for wood. A lot of the deforestation in Malawi is for firewood. Some of it's also for land farming. So then when you plant a nitrogen fixing tree, you are saying, I'm not going to cut this tree down. Instead, I'm going to plant under it. So you have to pick the right kind of tree. Growing corn under a mango tree is pretty much impossible. There's too much shade, too much acid. It doesn't work. Growing corn under a tall branching acacia tree works very well. The acacia, some of them lose their leaves right around the time the corn's coming up, so they're not even overshading it. They're not competing for resources. They're putting nitrogen in the soil. So some of it is changing the mindset that the tree's not in the way if it's the right tree. So we have to pick the right trees. And then the fruit trees. So it's fascinating. It's a similar thing here as there. You can kind of tell the age and income of a neighborhood based on the number and kinds of trees you're seeing. I remember reading that even in the US, neighborhoods with lower income tend to have no trees. And it's a fascinating thing. Why is that? I don't know. It just is. And it's something that would be good to change. And some of it's the age of the neighborhood. If you build a new neighborhood, you tend to knock down a lot of trees, and somebody has to plant them to make them come back. And what we encountered in renting in Malawi more than once is people said, well, renters don't plant trees because they're not going to be around to benefit from it. So they don't see the point. And so we ourselves have had to say, yeah, we're going to plant trees that we know we won't ever get the fruit from. We're just choosing to nurture them for a different reason. Twice now we have planted passion fruit vines and not gotten any fruit off them because we were in the US when they came into fruit. And we have to keep reminding ourselves that was okay. They're good for the environment, and a lot of other people ate the fruit. So we helped someone, even if not ourselves. And I think that's something that is difficult to remember, is that we are doing this for the next person. I'm planting the mango tree so that my kids can eat mangoes and play under it. I'm not planting it so that I can eat mangoes tomorrow. If I want mangoes tomorrow, I'm going to have to go buy them. And reminding ourselves that the effort it takes to grow the tree is actually not that much. Compared to the farming that they do every year, growing a tree is, once you get it going, you can largely ignore it, and then it'll still keep growing. So it's, I think, just a matter of reminding ourselves, both here and there, that, if we're enjoying that mango tree now, it's because our grandparents planted it. And so then we should do the same thing so that our grandchildren can have the same kind of experience we had. And yeah, it's not easy when people want mangoes now, or when they want a budget solution today.
So trees are an allegory to your ministry. Is that right?
I hope so. I hope so. Yes.
Planting a spiritual need or a spiritual seed in your community and training other people, chaplains, to carry on, like you're planting trees. That the fruit of the tree will not be yours. It's like some of the ministry that you do won't be yours, but will be others.
Thank you. Yes, I hope so.
Hi, Jeremy. I'm curious if you could explain the COVID situation in Malawi, the burdens it's putting on healthcare, whether you have access to vaccines, and maybe you could just give us an update on that.
Okay, I haven't seen the latest numbers on vaccines. I know that there are vaccines rolling out in Malawi. They're working on that. It's, we're here starting to get boosters and vaccinating the kids, and they're still trying to get the first set of adults wrapped up. So they're needing many more vaccines and many more vaccination programs. I think in Malawi, there's fairly good acceptance of it. There are some concerns, particularly when the first vaccine they had available was, I believe, the AstraZeneca, which was well known to not be as good as, say, Pfizer or Moderna. So then you get this question, which I think is a very legitimate question, of why are you giving us your junk as donations rather than the good stuff? So then it makes people suspicious, like, you aren't taking this vaccine, so why are you sending it to us, and should we really take it? So there is some, I think, legitimate questions. Not that I think the vaccines are unsafe, but I understand why those kind of questions come about based on how the politics are running. The numbers right now are low. They've had a couple waves over the years, just as we have here. For the most part, their numbers have been much, much lower than here. The impression we get is there's not a lot of following any of the mandates around masking or social distancing. And I think a lot of that's because people just haven't seen the problem. Now, saying that, we have a number of friends whose parents or grandparents have died of COVID. It's not that it hasn't had an impact. And what we do see when those things happen is a lot of times people are going to the hospital late. One of our good friends, his dad died. I think he was in the hospital just a couple of days. They had him on oxygen, and then they took the oxygen off so he could eat, and then he died. But they took about a week to go to the hospital because they thought he had malaria, and they didn't really think he had COVID. I think had they known day one he'd had COVID, they would have gotten him more treatment. And then the access to things like oxygen are much harder. So then when you do get sick, there's much less care, much less hospital support for the people with COVID. So we just read a pretty disturbing article about Tanzania, one of Malawi's neighbors to the north, about how they clearly have had a much bigger impact than they've reported, that there's been some pretty clear deception on the part of the government. I don't think that's happening. I do wonder if there are more people who are suffering from COVID, but it's getting marked off as pneumonia or malaria or something, or people just not, if you're really remote, maybe they just don't make it to the hospital to report it. So it's hard to know how accurate the numbers are, but the numbers are pretty encouraging at the moment. Julie?
Jeremy, I saw a short news article from PCUSA World Missions about a recent research report that was proposing changes in the alignment and more dispersal of the administrative support for missionaries out into the regions. Do we have any updates on that, and how do you see that affecting your work as you are able to return to Malawi?
Let me make sure that we're talking about the same thing. There was a report put out by Counter Stories Consulting about the way the PMA and World Mission functions, and it included a lot about finances. Is that what you're referring to?
Well, it didn't come in a regular PCUSA newsletter. It was more out on the social media, and it was a hired consultant hired by the PC. So that's the report I was talking about. And at the time I saw the short summary, it had not yet been approved by the board. So it was very early reporting to the widespread audience.
So as I tell you where we're at with that, just make sure I don't attend the board meeting. So if I get a couple of the details wrong, I apologize. I believe at this point, the board has approved the report overall, and they're waiting for the February meeting, between which time the director of the PMA, Reverend Dr. Diane Moffat, is supposed to come to them with some concrete ideas of how to implement what the report suggests. What that means is, at this point, the report hasn't greatly affected our day-to-day functioning. I think they're still trying to figure out what they want to implement from the report. There have been some changes in finances, which suggests that they will take a lot of those suggestions into mind to the degree they can, because some of the suggestions in that report, they may not be allowed to implement based on restrictions from Office of General Assembly and how banks work and things like that. But yes, there is a strong sense that a lot of the money is committed to particular projects, or maybe somebody set up a fund in honor of a certain thing. So it's restricted. So that money can only be used for certain kinds of things. And what we're wanting is more flexibility in how we can use the money so that we can respond to the needs as we see them right now. And to say, if there is X number of dollars, can we use them for what we want to use them for, rather than being told, no, you can only use half of that money and the other half is for something else. Just to be able to guide the mission agency and then spend the money, rather than the money guiding the mission agency, which is often how it feels at the moment. How exactly that will turn out, or what impact that will have on someone like me on the ground, is unclear at this point. But yeah, there's the number of Zoom meetings we have multiplied greatly after that report came out, to just, and I'm not even leadership, so I can only imagine what they're up to, but just to keep us informed of what's going on and what they're doing with it. And it has created a fair amount of stress, but there's a lot of good potential that could come from responding to that report and taking in their considerations and advice.
Thank you.
And they keep saying it's like a 30-month process. So who knows when we'll know what they're doing.
Jeremy, I had a question also, and thank you, by the way, for your briefing and all the work that you and your wife are both doing there. It's just wonderful. My question is if you could comment on the interplay between, and you talked a lot about the community activity, where everybody in the community is contributing together for the benefit of the community at large. And you mentioned the tree planting and putting that together and so on and so forth. How that interplays with individual families in the community that are both working for the community at large, but at the same time working for their own prosperity. In other words, the effort that they're putting in, and they're trying to maybe see some rewards from that effort based upon the amount of effort that they're doing. Sort of like a capitalistic kind of approach to living. And I was intrigued by your maize example, where everybody was contributing because they were concerned, or the community was concerned, that different families would sell the maize and then not have enough food to last for the season. So they all contributed to being stored in one place. And I could just imagine that the distribution of that storage for individual families to eat, was that taken, equal need, or was that taken, was there any relationship between what people contributed versus what they were able to receive? That's sort of does that make sense? That's my question. I was curious about your comments on
it. Does.
The community versus individual families wanting to work very hard and then see some gain for themselves in proportion to the amount of effort that they put in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, capitalism is alive and well in Malawi, even as they are a communal society. My understanding of the maize system, and now this is something Luta worked on, but my understanding is not that it was communal maize, but just a communal storage. So kind of like a bank. We're all going to the same bank, but it's my money. You can't go and get my money out of the bank. The bank has to make sure that they keep into account how much money you've put in to give to you and how much money I've put in to give back to me. And so I believe that's how the maze worked, was if I put in a bag of maize, that's mine. The issue was, I believe, more one of accountability, that the community was saying, part of our problem is we're going hungry. Part of the reason we're going hungry is we're selling the maize to get cash to buy stuff. So one solution is, what are we buying as vegetables? So we will plant vegetables so we don't have to do that. The other solution is, well, maybe, let's be honest, I saw a nice phone I wanted to buy, so I went home and sold some maize to get cash to go and buy the phone. There may not be any particular problem with that. I'm not trying to judge people's purchasing choices. But if I know that means I'm going to starve in November, that maybe isn't the best choice. But as human beings, we tend to think about now better than the future. I think it was Jerry Seinfeld who said, evening guy always messes over morning guy by staying up late, even though I know morning guy is going to suffer in the morning, I stay up late every night. You know, I do what feels good now instead of what will feel better later. And so it's a way to keep one another accountable. Just like I might have an accountability partner to go to the gym or do Bible study, it's a way to say, don't sell the maize off to buy whatever's pressing. If you have to come and tell everybody why you're selling it, you're much more likely to only sell it when the need's very high, and you'll have it around for eating. Additionally, and this wasn't mentioned, if I have to come to you and tell you why I'm selling it, then it gives the community an opportunity to know how they can help me. If I'm selling it for food because I really don't have enough and somebody else got a better vegetable yield, they may give me a few spare tomatoes instead of forcing me to go out and buy them from someone across the road. So I believe it was more of an accountability method. And I think they have seen good results from that, just the way they see it from the microfinancing community efforts. When we hold one another accountable, we stick to the goals we've stated. You know, if you're my workout buddy, you're not forcing me to work out when I said I didn't want to. I said I want to. I'm just asking for your help to help me stick to it. So I think people are still doing what they committed to. It's just a way to have the community help it. So arguably, if I don't want community accountability, then I'll keep the maize at home. And I think what struck us was just that. Let's take the workout thing for an example. We know obesity is a problem in the US, and we know we're all supposed to move more. So every January we buy a bunch of gym memberships we don't use. And the idea is that I know that obesity is a problem, so I should go out and exercise and eat better. Whereas the community approach is, we know obesity is a problem, so we are going to do something to make that less of a problem in our community. And maybe it will be that we hand out free gym memberships and call you when you're not there. You know, so we're going to set up an accountability way to pester everybody in the community to stick to the thing that we as a community said is a problem. So it's just a different way of looking at it. Instead of saying we as a community see the problem, and now we just keep our fingers crossed and hope everybody goes out and actually does their part, we as a community will continue to make sure that the solution is being put into place and involves all of us from the get-go. I hope I answered all that. If there's another clarity, let me know.
That was very good, by the way. I appreciate your response on that. And yeah, I'm just curious about it all, and I think you answered it very well.
We have seen times where people do struggle because you do work hard and you make a lot of money, and because there is a community, they expect you to give a lot back to them, and sometimes you don't want to. Sometimes you want a nice car or a nice house, and so we do hear from friends and colleagues that is a struggle in a communal society when you kind of just want to enjoy what you worked hard for. I don't know how they navigate that in their daily life. You know, we all have things we have to we have to work through, and cultural stresses. So that's one of theirs.
Yeah, I mean, my thought is that, and it applies globally, quite frankly, what we're talking about here, and even, very well-to-do societies. And that is, there's a community interest, and I think you've articulated that very well. And then there's also a contribution that as a citizen or a participant in the community that you feel an obligation to support and even contribute. It's why we contribute to charity and our churches and organizations that we believe are for the benefit of the broader community at large. And at the same time, there are elements that we have based upon our efforts at work where we're willing to contribute a certain percentage, et cetera, but then we also like to see a return based upon how much effort we put in that is benefiting our individual family or ourselves. So I think you described it very well. And I was encouraged by and some of what you described in terms of, people taking different approaches between the balance of those two things varies. And frankly, it varies across the world. It varies in our country. It varies in Europe. It varies in very well-developed societies as well. So I did enjoy your answer. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think it varies even here in the U.S. from community to community. You're right. It all kind of depends on how people are looking at things. Diane, I can't tell if you have your hand up or if you're just fixing a video problem there. Okay, all right.
Oh, no. I was going to ask you to share with this group what you shared with me before when we were doing the tech setup about your expectations for returning to Malawi and what the situation is like there, and just a little look back on memory lane, because I know you shared with us a year ago what your daughter's birth prompted you to return, etc.
Yeah, we came back in March 2020 because we were pregnant and we were due for time to visit the churches in the U.S. and then got trapped. And every time we've talked to anybody, it's we're hoping we'll go back in a few months. So that continues to be the case. There is indication right now that month will be January. We are fairly sure that the way Malawi has been going, it will continue to be as safe as it will be, and that the way vaccines are going here, that we will feel safe. And so we are hoping to ask for travel permission in January. At the same time, just this Friday, we were told that it's expected that the PCUSA will lift travel restriction in January, so we will be expected to go back. Now, they have said that 5 or 6 times and then moved it. So we are hoping that because they've said it and we've said it, it will actually happen this January, that we will go back. I'm just reminded as I say that we've said that before. So we're not quite sure what the future holds, but that's our current hope. And we are well overdue for going back. So we're very excited for that. Well, I do want to say thank you again. If you have any other questions or clarifications, please do ask. But I do want to say thank you again for the time and to meet with you again. I can hardly believe it's been a year or as long as it's been. And it's just great to be here with you and to have the opportunity to share. And thank you again for all of your continued support of not just us, but the ministries in Malawi.
Jeremy, thank you for taking the time to be with us today and sharing your ministry. Know that you and Luta and your family are in the prayers of the community at Potomac Presbyterian Church as you plan to head back to Malawi and as you continue to minister in the ways that you've shared with us. So go with God's blessing and know that you are supported and surrounded by the prayers of this community.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and sign off.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Bye.